Hi, and welcome to the Capsule 21 podcast. This is episode 2. It is called, Is the Future of On-Chain NFTs Off-Chain? In this episode, we are going to be asking the question, are on-chain NFTs dead? And are off-chain NFTs better? And this is not a joke, it's not a troll. This is coming from some of the biggest on-chain aficionados, the biggest on-chain maxis you're ever going to find, which is basically the Capsule 21 Artist Collective. So that's me, Dove, and Piv. We are all about timeless art, and in particular timeless art through the blockchain in terms of on-chain art. And so if we're saying on-chain is dead, you know it's dead. This is episode 2 of the Capsule 21 podcast. This is a weekly podcast about technology, art, and particularly how to appreciate, create, buy, and celebrate the timeless kind of art. So welcome everyone. So in brief, here's the idea behind this episode. So first, what is on-chain art? Okay, if you're listening to this for the first time, you're out there and you think you even know, it's always good to kind of really drill into the basic concepts. What is it? Well, of course, on-chain art refers to on-blockchain art. And so what is the blockchain? Okay, we're going very basic right now. It's important. It's the week of the merge. Let's go back to the basics of the blockchain just for a quick second. So what is the blockchain? So even more basic, you have to go back and say, what is decentralization? Okay, because that's the idea behind all of this stuff. And decentralization is this idea that you can't stop an idea or a piece of art or a piece of content, an MP3, a movie. You can't stop the dissemination of this art by any single point of failure. You can't just stop one person, stop it everywhere. And so early decentralization technologies, stuff like BitTorrent, Napster before that. So basically there were these things where if one person has the file, everyone has the file. And why didn't we stop there? Like, that's a pretty good way to distribute art, right? If you have a picture and you don't want it to be censored, you can give it to 100 people and they have to censor every single one of the 100 or every single 1,000 people to censor the art. So that's pretty good. That's way better than just, putting it on Amazon servers and Amazon gets one phone call and deletes it. So the problem, though, with this version of decentralization was that there was no, and this is where the blockchain comes in, no consensus. So if you wanted to see, okay, here is, a list of all of the BitTorrents in the world, or here's a list of art that you've done, or here's a list of art in this series that you've done, you can't do that. And of course, Pirate Bay famously always playing the game of cat and mouse, because if you're trying to list all the BitTorrents, hard to do that decentralized way. And so the blockchain idea was basically, okay, how can we have decentralization and how can we have consensus? How can we have an agreement on, what a list of things says? It's like we're both talking the same list. BitTorrent, I can have my list that says I'm a billionaire. You can have your list that says I'm broke. They can both exist. They contradict. That's fine. The blockchain basically says I'm either a billionaire or broke, and we all agree on it. And so the consensus mechanism is the core of the blockchain idea in terms of getting over this hump. And we just changed that this week. There was an old consensus mechanism, which was basically about solving math problems. That was proof of work. And we changed consensus mechanisms, but you can't do that actually, because the whole point of a consensus mechanism, it's a very specific and technical thing that governs how consensus is formed. You can't change that, while it is happening. You have to move to a different blockchain. So it's a pretty momentous week, but the consensus mechanism is also a pretty magical thing just in general, that a bunch of people could agree on how much money everyone has and not fight over it or not cheat. So then we get to why the blockchain is cool for art, because more than just talking about money, Ethereum has this sort of internal state where, it's not just like this list of, who has what that you can observe from the outside. Transactions within Ethereum can refer to the state of Ethereum itself. And so, unlike Bitcoin, which is more so like a spreadsheet, Ethereum is a computer that can have a million spreadsheets in it, unlimited spreadsheets in it, unlimited data storage. So Ethereum is this computer. You can store stuff in Ethereum, you can do computation in Ethereum, and not only can no one stop you, but everyone else has to bring you along. Everyone else has to form a consensus that includes you being around. So there are these two really nice properties of blockchains when it comes to art, which is they're decentralized, but also there's this permanence aspect. You don't have to pay twice. You don't have to pay every month to keep your data on the blockchain. You don't have to worry about it because everyone else has to worry about it. Actually, if you put your content on there, everyone else has to worry about keeping it. Otherwise, they can't do anything with it. So if someone in a far off land wants to send $1 billion of cash to someone else, they have to acknowledge and bring forward your little pixel art, which is kind of a cute and powerful thing. And it's an amazing idea, actually. And so when it comes to on-chain art, this is really the ideal, where instead of having to worry, about what's going to happen with your art, especially censorship, you don't have to worry, and you are protected by the overall usage of the system. You're protected by people you don't know, people you don't like, people who hate you. They have to preserve your art, otherwise they cannot use the entire thing. There's no way to change the history without breaking it. So this is this great thing. And so timeless art is art that is artistically good, but also can last. And so how does it last to the blockchain? Well, you can always go to the blockchain and get the picture out. So if you go to the new Capsule 21 project from a week ago, Dovetail's Yunks, this is an on-chain transformation of the CryptoPunks, basically taking iconic CryptoPunks, the little, they have the alien ones and everything, the CryptoPunks, you can sort of play with these. And Yunks is an on-chain transformation that basically takes the colors of the CryptoPunks and shifts them. And this color shift happens in a way that when you go to view one of these things, you can get the entire content of each image without actually using a web browser to download an image. You just go to Etherscan, use any client to get this right from the blockchain. And CryptoPunks are a great example of this, actually, because all of the CryptoPunk data is on chain, and that means you can do unlimited derivative works of the CryptoPunks, as we have done here. And each one of those derivative works is pretty easy to keep on chain, because you have the data already available. So this is the idea, and it's very cool. And about 8 months ago, and I think a year ago even, this was one of the most seductive ideas going on in crypto stuff, in Ethereum, in blockchain. But I think some of the sheen has come off, and what I mean by that is it's a little bit of, in the end, a little bit of a LARP. And what I mean by a LARP is it is something that you can describe as being about permanence and being about timeless art. But if you actually carry that thought through, what you will find is that it's actually doesn't actually quite work, right? And the reason it doesn't quite work is because even if there is data that is being stored on the blockchain, there still needs to be an instruction about what to do with that data to show a picture to the user, right? And so if you are using something like a PNG on a server, right, and then viewing this PNG, that set of instructions is actually pretty simple. There are a lot of software, a lot of programs that can show you a PNG. And this is why if you are on a phone, it's easy to look at a PNG. If you are on a slow phone, it's even easy to look at a PNG. PNG has been around for a long time. So on iOS photo apps, it works. In Twitter, in every other app, it works. PNGs really work. But a lot of the time when you look at SVGs, they are not like doing as much work to make it as easy as a PNG makes it. So generating a PNG, storing a PNG is much more expensive, much more in terms of computation and space. The blockchain's about being cheap. So the blockchain, you kind of offload a lot of this stuff to the user, and you do it with a technology that's called SVG. And when you have an SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. The initial idea behind SVG was kind of what it says. You have vector and scalable, which means, vector is kind of like, instead of, laying out every pixel of a photograph, you sort of describe what's in the image by saying there's a circle here, there's a rectangle here. And through these descriptions, you can create something that is a lot more scalable, because making a photo bigger, that's pretty much very hard to do, because you have to know what a person looks like bigger. But making a rectangle bigger is just a math problem. So scalable vector graphics was this idea. But then over time, SVG gathered more and more capabilities. And now it's a very hard thing to do to display the SVG. So essentially you have this issue where you're optimizing storage, you're optimizing computation, you're making it work on the blockchain. And yes, amazing, I'm spitting out something that is on chain, and I did it. I optimized it, I made it work on chain. It's not a ton of money, and I'm spitting this thing out. But now you're asking the user to take this thing you spit out and really fight to display it in a good way. And you're asking the user to try to put it in the Twitter hex, which they cannot do. So, Twitter has this feature where you can put an NFT in a hex as your profile picture. You can't do that with an SVG. Whose problem is that, right? I used to think that was Twitter's problem. Now I'm kind of opening my eyes. Maybe that's actually my problem. You can't view it in a bunch of other iOS apps. And even in a web browser, you're going to end up with some inconsistency. So on Yunks, for example, and this is kind of an artistic element too, there's a noise filter, which is a native SVG element, which you can add a distortion or noise or turbulence to an image. And it turns out when you do this, it looks different on different browsers. There's no actual way to display this. So if you want to get like a great image of Yunks, like, on your wall or on a piece of paper, good luck doing that. So essentially, we have come to this situation where we are being so literal with on-chain art. We're saying, hey, the image, the data file of the image is on-chain. That's great, but we lose the fact that to actually display something, you need data plus something to do with that data. And what we're asking people to do is use a full web browser and a full-powered computer to display SVG information. And good luck putting a web browser on-chain. That's a huge program. It's really hard to run. It's really hard to run overall. Web browsers are some of the most complicated software you can find, especially an operating system. And it's extremely difficult to run embedded. It's extremely difficult to have a page that has 5 different web pages in it in a little squares each. Very, very hard to do. And so is this really timeless art if you can't actually display it, even though you can do it, but it's really hard? Is it timeless art to put in the user's hand, hey, you make this timeless, user? This is my question. So I've got a couple other ideas here, but pausing for a moment. Let me start with you, Dov. I was calling out Yunks a couple times, and in fact, you said you've been talking about this a lot. Does this? What do you feel?
Just about the rendering capability.
Yeah, I mean, the practical thing that you went through with Yunks, and philosophically speaking, like how do you even take a screenshot, but also is this struggle to jump over this technical bar, and the technical bar being, I've given you something from the blockchain that makes it possible in principle to show something. Is that really on chain? No matter how hard it is, to display it. Like, imagine if your artistic vision were the version of Yunks that Safari shows, which I think kind of it was, right? Now, you are basically putting something on chain, but you're telling people, hey, great news, it's on chain. Just get Safari. Just buy an expensive Mac, get Safari, and you can view my art. It's on chain. It lasts forever. Like, isn't this kind of ridiculous?
Yeah, it is kind of ridiculous. I think I might even go so far as to say that I regret Yunks being on chain. I think that we've achieved something that's very good and cool. I think it's very good to do things that are firsts. And I think it's very novel that we were able to use FE turbulence and FE blend to achieve the effect that we did. The grass is always greener. I kind of wish people were able to right click and save it and have it look the way that I envisioned it looking when I was creating the images, right? And that's kind of disappointing. Although, is that my fault, or does Twitter just need to provide better support? Does Safari need to provide better support? Maybe that's the answer, but I think maybe that's a stubborn way of thinking about it. It's hard to say, really. If you want your Yunk to look the best, you should right click and save it from OpenSea, and then bring it into Photoshop and apply a noise filter, Gaussian, non-monochromatic at 5%, and then export that as a PNG. And that's the way that I wanted them to look. But obviously you can't do that. And there's trade-offs that have to be made, and that's all fine and good. I'm happy with the final product, but there's drawbacks, pros and cons to both. I know a lot of people are very happy and bought Yunks specifically because they are on chain and because they liked the fancy stuff that we did with the SVG layering.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I agree with that, and I agree with the grass being greener. And I'm trying to, next time around, I'm not going to make this mistake. I want a best of both worlds solution, because going pure off chain, it's not like, I was an idiot. We were idiots. We were thinking about on chain. Let's just, that's kind of shocking too, in a way, to say, hey, it's really just this flat image at this resolution. You get no information about, the process, the artistic intent here. The beauty of the SVG approach is you can kind of walk through the thinking, and you can actually copy it and, remix it and whatever. And it's a lot cooler, but it just doesn't actually look good because, it does look good if you do it right, but it's hard to do It's hard to do
But
right. And so,
I think it's interesting that there's not just one image too. I think that's an interesting aspect. I know that Dove mentioned earlier that for some artworks you really have the description how it has to look. There's not really the artwork itself, but just the description. So it is also part of an artwork, or it can be part of it that you describe, like he just did, what it should be.
Yeah, I agree. It like asks an interesting question about how would you display it. You know, we have the Capsule 21 space inside of OnCyber, and we've previously displayed Capsule 21 works inside of Sov's his on cyberspace. So how would you display a Yunk, and what's the proper size to render it at, and all of these things? It's an interesting question. You know, the thing that I released probably like a month or two ago now was my collection called Moonlake, which is purposefully very aleatoric and difficult to view in the proper way. But I did that kind of on purpose. And here it's a little less on purpose, but maybe it's still on brand because it's something I've experimented with in the past.
Mm-hmm.
well, Dub,
Yeah.
there's no such thing as on person, right? Okay, just you don't know what you were thinking. Like, come on, I consider it to all be on purpose for a purpose. But anyway, sorry, I think I interrupted you, Viv.
No.
So yeah, I think it is. Look, what I'm trying to say here is, if you abandon being an on-chain purist, you are going to open your eyes to what's really going on here and get a best of both worlds thing. Because I think there really is two things here, right? There is something called art, right? And art is mysterious. And what is it even? It's the banana on the wall, and like who knows what art is, right? And it's different all the time. And there's another thing called a photograph of art, right? A photograph of art, the duct tape banana on the wall. People have, I believe, taken photos of this. A lot of them. Photo. At some point, you have to take a quote unquote photo, or in cyber land, it's called a screenshot. You take a screenshot and you show something. On Cyber does something. We actually, in very few circumstances, even can experience true art. We have to experience photographs because you can't be there with the banana. You know what I mean? You can't actually put on Cyber does not support animated SVGs or whatever our thing is, even different. So how can you, and on Twitter, okay, Twitter is a photograph of art, is a screenshot of art on Twitter, period, end of sentence. I'm done complaining about Twitter. It's not going to be art. It's going to be a photograph of art. And so the problem is you either get just photograph if you are an off-chain maxi and you're just, hyper rational and short-term thinking and, probably, it's good too, but that's just the photograph. And then with Yunks, you get just the art. And the art is better, but it's like, oh God, more art. Oh my God, it's so annoying. So that's the tension. How do you get a photograph of art and art in the same thing? And I would say that a photograph of art, they made a great format for this. It's called a PNG. And if you can't get a PNG in a smart contract because it costs too much to store, then sorry, some photos deserve to be stored off chain. In fact, most of the photos on my phone are stored off chain, and that's fine because maybe there's you store the thing that's the quote unquote master copy, and then you take a photograph of it. But what do you think? So you have a photo and then the art.
Wow, sorry, I'm going to go on a very quick tangent. Apple has the proprietary .heic file format, which is like a super compressed JPEG basically, and only renders correctly on Apple phones. I wonder if you could make an NFT that was a .heic, and then you could only look at it on the iPhone.
I think that's an amazing example. Exactly, that's exactly my point. I think that is such a cursed file format. Now it actually does something. I've Googled this extensively. Like, do I want to turn this off? And it's like live photos. And I like live photos. So you have to deal with innovation, but just like, it's exactly my point. It's like, do you want to go through life and you're thinking, a photo? And no, it's like, actually, really, it's like complicated art thing you have to know something about that's special. Like there's something like nice about just a photo. And what's great about PNG, right, is it's, you get the 24-bit color depth and you get lossless. So, that's an amazing file format as far as I'm concerned, and everyone can view it. But yeah, I think HEIC is cursed. Like, I don't know how to do anything with it. And I agree that it would be a. I think the 14 has like some other camera raw thing or whatever. That's but yeah, that's insane. So are you doxing yourself as an iPhone user, Dove?
Yeah, I've been fully Apple ecosystem for like 2 years now.
It's an amazing ecosystem. Pib, what do you use? Let me dox you.
Everything combined.
I love it. I love it. Although, yeah, I guess
If you're an Apple user, use the clap emoji, and if you're a Windows and Android user, use the peace emoji.
The cloud, the clout,
the clap. If you clap for Apple, peace for Android, Windows.
Let's see it, y'all. Let's see it. Don't worry if you're nervous about which to do. You can do either, and the algorithm will not check to see what phone you actually have. It doesn't matter what you do right now. Just remember that. The algorithm is not going to pull up to your house and say, excuse me, do you actually have the phone corresponding to the emoji that you, it's like, that doesn't happen. I've never heard of it happening. I don't really worry about that kind of thing. So yeah, whose problem is it, and what's the solution? And also, just one last thing I'd say is, like, this is a very deep thing about computer science. Like, you kind of want to be careful with this stuff because you might end up like touching on some important topic in computer science. And so in computer science, there's basically this idea that code and data are the same thing. There's no way to distinguish, in principle, code and data. And this was a foundational result in computer science by Turing. And the result was basically this idea that, you can have a pocket calculator, right? And that calculates. And, you can program your fridge maybe. Like, do you need a custom device for every thing you want to do? Or is there a way to transfer one device into another? Like, can you package up the code from one device and use it as data and feed it into another device, right? Like, this is kind of an incredible idea. Like, he proved that there was this thing called a universal Turing machine, which is basically a computer, and you could not have to program everything into it. You could feed other code into it as data. You could have a function, a computer program that took as one argument, as one parameter, the code to run, and as the other parameter, the actual data. So this is not at all obvious when you look at this, but it's the same thing. And so when you look at SVG, it's like, okay, we are going light on data, right? We're storing very little data on the blockchain, but we're actually, wink, wink, requiring a ton of code that doesn't exist on the blockchain. You have to bring to it a browser. So it's like light on data, heavy on code. It's the same thing. That's same as being heavy on data. So, you can't afford to be heavy on data. You're not doing it right, everything. So I've got an idea of how to fix this. And but first, let me just open it up. I mean, I don't know if Rob's interested in chatting. No pressure, but I know he has some interesting POVs on this. Does anyone out there want to make any quick comments? This is going to be on a podcast later, so it's could be very good for your personal brand. Just saying. Okay.
That was good.
It's true.
Yeah, if you want to be famous in 10 years, you have to be on the second ever Capsule 21 podcast as a guest. And then people in the history books will go, whoa, you were on the second episode of the Capsule 21
That's
podcast.
Amazing.
On the day of the merge.
Yeah, on the day of the merge. Are you
Holy
kidding me?
crap.
This is your chance, Anon. You know how people say, like, Anon? This is your chance, Anon. You know what? It's so good to me because people are just like, oh my God, amazing. The merge was such a success. It's like, bro, it's been less than 24 hours. How are you calling this a success? Like, I hope it's a success. People are just going along with it. It's fine. It's fine. I'm a merge fan. I'm nervous about it. And okay, so yeah, what's the solution? What is the actual future of on-chain art? And how do we solve all these problems? And why are we doing this finally in the best way possible with this new spinning punk project? So step one is eliminate SVGs. I am done with SVGs. I think SVGs are an insane tweener file format that are very misleading. And what makes them extremely misleading is that they have this feature where you think they should be easy to display, but they're actually impossible to display. They're so hard to display. You need a web browser. And the reason for this is that you can actually put anything you want in an SVG. You can put a whole HTML page in an SVG, right? You could put anything in there, YouTube video, an image, so much for scalable vector graphics, right? You can literally put a photo in there. It's like SVG doesn't make sense. It's misleading. Let's get rid of SVG, okay? And let's go in two directions at once. We go, two directions at once. One direction is we lean into PNG, the best file format ever, basically. Don't at me. And then when we're trying to do something complicated, we just be honest about it. We be honest about it. And we say, look, this is HTML. Okay, this is not SVG. SVG doesn't exist anymore. There's no way you can just say, hey, can I open this in Inkscape anymore? Like, good luck. Even if you can open an SVG in Inkscape, which Inkscape can open, the simpler ones with the rectangles and stuff, you can't know that it's the right thing because there might be other stuff in there Inkscape can't display. So the capabilities of SVG, even if you think people are using the simpler parts and restricting their usage to the easier to render, the fact that it has these capabilities means you're done. You cannot ever render something simply. You have to be a web browser. So we say, okay, it's just HTML. Now, the nice part about HTML is it's got 1,000 times more people hammering on it every day and doing stuff with it than SVG. SVG is niche and is niche for a reason. HTML is massive. And HTML is something that is, strictly speaking, with an SVG, you can do anything, but HTML makes it a lot easier because HTML is designed to do anything. And when you're doing something with HTML, you can you can have JavaScript. You have tremendous control, and you have tremendous control when it comes to what's called the viewport. The viewport is the browser window. So that's fundamentally the issue here, I think, that you are doing when you are doing something with programmatic SVG HTML. You are optimizing something for the browser window, and then the user is going to take a screenshot of that as a PNG. So these are the two avenues for art. You have the art itself, which is something that appears visible through a browser viewport, through a browser window that has some width and height to it and maybe can scroll or whatever. That's the art through the web browser. And then you take a screenshot of that, and that's the photograph of the art, and that's the PNG. And so when you're designing something for a viewport, you have to think about, okay, what is the margin and padding of all these things? How do I position things? What happens if the viewport changes, right? Because most of the time for a web browser, you don't get control over the viewport. You have to respond to the viewport. So for example, a web page, right, can start off as a square and the user can resize the viewport. And so if you're looking at a piece of art, you might squint your eye, you may move. It's not a perfect analogy, but you have to think about the viewport as the creator of conceptual on-chain art, not just think, oh, I'm doing an image. You're not doing an image. You're doing a web page, do a viewport. And then once you have the viewport really ironed out, now you really make it easy, actually, for someone to take a screenshot because they know exactly what to do. With an SVG, you don't know what to do. It's sitting there on a page somewhere. If you open the SVG in a web browser, maybe it's going to display it too big or too small. No, you design an HTML page that displays the content exactly how you want it. Now the user can take a screenshot. And there are a bunch of ways to take screenshots of HTML pages. There's ways in Chrome DevTools, there's Chrome extensions, there's most notably command line tools. There are all these ways to take screenshots. This is a well understood problem. Now we can start taking pictures. And the beautiful part about this is that there's actually an affordance for this, which big bad OpenSea, we hate them, except they're pretty good. So they came up with this idea of animation URL. And animation URL is a property of a token. It's on token URI, just like image and image data and all that stuff. It's supposed to be a link to a web page that you can see the thing animated in, and that's cool. But you can actually use it as anything you want. You can use it as a web page that shows anything. And it can even be an on-chain web page. It doesn't have to be a link. It can be a data URI, which is just like the data itself. So you can just show a web page. And so what you can do with this now is I would propose using this as the central mode, because when you use this, you are telling people how to take a picture of it. And it will now allow you in the image slot to use the picture, to put the PNG. So so no SVG, HTML goes in animation URL, PNG link off-chain goes in image. And the way you generate the PNG image is you go and take screenshots of your HTML. And that's what I'm actually doing now with this Spinning Punk project. So I created the HTML pages, and now I wrote a program that basically goes through all 10,000, takes about 2 hours, and loads up each HTML page, takes a screenshot, and saves it. In fact, there's some JavaScript that gets the sizing right, so there's some complexity here, but that is how it should work. And so now you can put these things off chain. It doesn't matter if you lose these things. Anyone can always take a picture. You have the art. This is the picture of the art. It's much more disposable. And finally, the benefit of this is that OpenSea is smart enough to put the HTML version on the asset page. When there's one page, looking at one token, you see the HTML page, the art, you're looking at the art. On the collection page, you see the photo of the art. And this is actually really, really, really important for the reason I was talking about earlier, which is you don't want to put 10 SVGs on the same page. You want to put 20 SVGs on the same page. It does not work. There's no way to guarantee that will work. And in fact, with this project, because each SVG has 360 punks in it, it crashes the browser. So imagine this. On chain, it's so great. You do something on chain, it's valid, it's beautiful. You put it on OpenSea, it crashes. Whose problem is that? Really? That's OpenSea's problem? I think that's your problem. So don't tempt fate by creating a situation where you have a ton of SVGs on the same page. It will crash. On-chain Maryland diptychs, PIB in my earlier project, crashes sometimes, So HTML page, that's the art. It goes on the individual token page. Off-chain image data, you take the picture, it doesn't matter, you can reduplicate it at any point. That goes on the collection page, and then SVG is never used again. This is the future of on-chain art, according to me right now. What do you think, Dov? What do you think, Biv?
Let's do it. Let's get PNGs on-chain. Let's spend the money.
No, I'm saying the PNGs can be off-chain. This is my point.
No, but we got to get them on chain. We got to spend, how much Ethereum is it to put like a PNG, like a 1000 by 1000 PNG?
I think you mean how much Ether is it to do that? Because Ethereum is the blockchain. Okay, yeah, I think it's, what is it, like, $5,000 a megabyte or something? I think it's a lot.
Yeah. I'm going to spend the price of a Lamborghini in order to get a high resolution photograph on chain.
Yeah, I think the key is to put the thing on chain that you take the picture of, and then take the picture of it. And, here's the other thing, here'd be my standard too, is look, there's an image and it's lost because it's off chain. Guess what? Ignore that in the metadata and just take your own screenshot. Here is a real way to do it. With an SVG, yes, you can take a screenshot of it, but in my experience, thinking about this, doing this for one day, in my experience, and just thinking about it, you don't want to take a screenshot of an SVG. It doesn't exist. You need to put an SVG in an HTML page. You need to make sure that looks perfect, and then there might be JavaScript that you need to do to get the sizing right. So yeah, this is my...
No, I agree. PNGs are far superior, and that's why the entire internet uses them instead of SVG. SVG, as a graphic designer, very useful. I love SVG because it lets me make things very big without making them blurry, which is cool. I love SVG for that. But in a lot of cases, I would say in 95% of cases, you just want a PNG, and that's the one major drawback of on-chain. Everything should be on-chain except for this one crucial, fatal flaw.
Can you have both? So just, I invited Michael up here. Let me give him a little preface here and tell him, give him the flowers. I love that phrase. So Michael created Indelible Labs, which is a transformative product for putting art on chain, creating on-chain collections, and has launched a bunch of successful projects. But before he did that, he had a very cool successful project of his own called On-Chain Kevin. I'm an On-Chain Kevin whale. It's basically a reference to the Pixel Mons Kevin meta. Remember that? The space moves fast, but it was a meme for a time. On-Chain Kevin actually did the thing, then I'll get to you. I see you, Yoke. On-Chain Kevin actually did a version of what I'm saying, which is they had a way to generate the SVG on the function, on the contract, but had the main thing be, the main image be PNG that was generated by their API. And I had, for a while, mixed feelings about this. And I often was thinking, well, the hex means it's not on chain, so that's a negative thing. And I'm a nerd and I like nerds, but now I'm thinking maybe I don't like nerds as much as I thought. So you were ahead of your time, Michael, or were you? What's up?
Yeah, I think I don't know. If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably do something similar to what we're doing now, feature-wise, with the contracts that get released on Indelible Labs, which is provide the ability to do both, where you can have it be the token that you see be on chain or off chain. But I hear what you're saying. It's tricky to make that main one a PNG with a generative collection, which is why it's with SVGs it's like really easy because you can just layer them, or even doing something like what you were saying, Middlemarch, with HTML, but obviously HTML wouldn't render on the collection view. It would just render on that tokens view, the tokens page, right?
Right. So yeah, I guess
but with I think that I think it's tricky because I think people want that main standard, which is the image data, or is it just image in the metadata? I don't know that
the iconically on-chain one is the image data. Is image data. I think you could probably use either, but yeah.
I think you can use either, but it's tricky. But I think the main point, or the main goal, would be to truly qualify as on chain is just that the data exists on chain and can be accessible at any time in the future, whether it's the image that you see or something that you can call on the contract. So that's my thought.
So let me ask this question. So and then I'll get to you, Yo, because I want to hear what you have to say. But just to follow up on that, so right now there's a feature, as I understand it, right, on indelible contracts where you can, as the owner of a token, I wonder if actually that's clear, is when you transfer the token. As an owner of a token, you can say, show me the SVG when you call a token URI, or show me instead this the PNG, which is, I guess, cached by Indelible Labs server. And this is the choice, and this is the classic question. If you have the choice, right, what is the default? Because most people aren't going to change, and I think in your case the default is the SVG version, and that means you're an on-chain maxi. Is that right?
Yeah, that is the default. And then if you want, as the holder, you can go and have it render your token specifically using our API, and that can toggle at any time, so that if our organization over here doesn't survive 10 years, you can always switch it back to on chain, and then you're good.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's good to have that redundancy. In the case of the project that Piv and I are doing now, it's literally not possible to do the SVG because it crashes OpenSea. So that's kind of changed my opening. But anyway, Yoke, what's going on? You have your hand up. How's life? Yoke.
Got the sus egg. Got the mongoose sus egg PFP. What's up, Yoke?
Sorry, I was just riding my scooter, but I've been listening this whole time, and I actually have some maybe we could do a little bit of Socratic, but my idea was to ask a few questions and see what you guys' thoughts were, because I have a hypothesis that sort of lines up with this. So I think the minimum you can get away with calling something on chain is the checksum of the data, and that could be enough. If you have enough computers, given enough time, you could solve for that quote unquote hashing function if there's truly no overlap with that data.
That's funny. I think that's a. So I think that's a really interesting right? So if you have a hash is like a fingerprint of a file. And so a fingerprint doesn't allow you to get the human being, but if there is a human being, it allows you to determine if it's the right person. And this is what IPFS uses. So if you ever lose an IPFS file, the hash defines the link to the file. So anyone with the file can create the link that everyone can get to. And so the question is kind of like, if you, with a fingerprint, can you, with enough time, grow a human, that has the exact, behavior or whatever? And the answer with the computer thing, of course, is like,
Right.
yes, with enough time, but
IPFS has that quirk as well. If you upload the same data, you get the same content ID, and that's just because it's the deterministic hashing of that data. So the pass for IPFS is like, what data do you want? Give me the checksum of that data, and we'll go and see if we have it. So I think when you have IPFS, you're already like on chain with the content hash being there. If we wanted to like be very pedantic about what on chain is, and I also want to like kind of stress like at any point we're sort of linking to things naturally, like at the very least, even if you're doing on chain art. I think Michael, you put it well though. It's like you can at least reconstruct it from just the chain data. But like moon kitties, for instance, there's just a genome, and that's a very small amount of data that they had to store, and it's very easy to create new crypto kitties. It's just a sequence of letters and numbers. So I guess like my point is, in terms of like SVG and on-chain stuff, like you find out pretty quickly like SVG is like this like powerful file format that nobody wants to use, because it's not optimal drawing infinitely scaled images, especially at high def. And then I guess like the URIs of like utilizing the animation URI. Kim Asendorf has some great pieces I love. His latest work, I think, is actually I don't know what his latest work is, but his last piece that I got was sabotage.chem, which is a web URI. But all of his works look like, to the people that don't know what they're doing, they think, oh, this is on-chain work. But it's literally just the URI to his website. And he's created generative algorithms. He's like, for sure, creating generative art, but people refuse to call it that because it's not on-chain. And I think it's like kind of like harmful to the space for that reason.
Yeah, no, I think, I think the purity thing is you got to be careful. It's going to be passionate about this kind of stuff, and in particular, I think just the anti-censorship, anti-corporation side of things. Like in my previous job, I was the CEO and founder of a digital media company, a music company called Genius.com, which was basically like a lyrics site that told you what the lyrics meant. And we got into this big thing with Google taking lyrics from our site and putting them above our site. And it's easy to, I think, especially in the context of like art that's fun, talk about on-chain as like, hey, like, it's a game that we're all playing. But, let me assure you that from my time, like suing Google and losing, and we're trying to take it to the Supreme Court, maybe we'll do that. I don't know. I'm not actually directly involved anymore. It's like, it is very real how much power corporations, have, and it's really unlimited the amount of power they have. And so any way to have any chance to do something that's not completely controlled by them. And that's what drew me to, to Ethereum. So you can get kind of emotional and like, nerdy about this stuff, or at least I can. So I want to be a little bit of a purist in terms of there is something at stake here with this whole blockchain thing. It isn't just, playing around. But I do agree that you need to have, a rationalistic outlook. You can't just be so pure. So I agree IPFS gets a negative thing when people say it's on chain, no IPFS. Blah, blah. It's like, well, IPFS is pretty good. I mean, for one thing, it gives you a link that never changes, and for another thing, it means it's impossible to tamper with the data. So if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, this is what this contract refers to," it's like, well, you can just check, is it really? And if it isn't, then it doesn't work. Whereas with on chain, I mean, you could have contract A referring to contract B, and then oops, contract B has the security flaw, and then contract A has the wrong data, and there's no checksum. So in some ways, IPFS is actually better because it is not a closed system of contracts talking to contracts. It's based on real reality, which is you hash something, and good luck finding another thing that has that hash to it. So there's something quite nice about IPFS. Now someone still has to pay the bill and everything. On the generative art side, I do think it's a shame because previously OpenSea didn't really let you do generative art that was JavaScript and everything in the animation URL. At least that's what I've been told. Now it does. So if you look at something like art blocks, it's really kind of a shame that art blocks and all of its glory is fundamentally, a centralized project because they have to maintain the server, right? Like I think they could have done all of that and had all the code be on chain and have it work. So I think, anyone doing, anyone who's being dismissed by doing, because they're doing generative art off chain, the good news is that the generative art's the hard part, and the on chain is much easier. So they can move it on chain. And, yes, maybe there's provenance issues there or whatever, but there's a lot of possibilities, and particularly if you're down to throw out any requirement of rendering in a good way. There's this Rose project that was looking pretty good. Someone's coming out with NPM for the blockchain.
The thing is like the guy Dom who made who essentially imported yes into work, right?
Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's also been a lot of work around archiving web pages with the nuances that come with JavaScript updating. You can't assume JavaScript's I have a lot of processing.js or paper.js sketches that no longer work because the browser changed to Canvas thing, or I imported the wrong version, but I guess that would be solved with immutability.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point though, this kind of gets to what I'm saying too about there's no such thing as just here's the data. If you show someone an on-chain HTML page, they need to have a sufficiently advanced browser to view it, but they also maybe need one that's not too advanced, right? Maybe you should put along with the thing, you should say, okay, here's the HTML page, here's the SVG, and here's the exact version of Chromium. You don't want to use the Google version, and so yeah, it's kind of this impossible problem. Whereas with the PNG, right, everyone is going to render the PNG the same way since 2002 or whatever, since 1995. So, but yeah, I think it's a really challenging thing to archive the JavaScript. It is better to not have external dependencies. I mean, I think if you have all the JavaScript you need in a single blob that you can shove into an iframe, I think that does get you a lot of the way. Yeah. But if you look at just even the differences between Chrome and Safari today, contemporaneously, we live in a pretty advanced society. We have the AI art thing and VR coming soon, getting bigger, and yet still Chrome and Safari don't look the same. So, pretty
sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
But I wanted to tail in on that. The archive.org project does some crazy stuff with virtual machines. I think it's actually part of Rhizome, but you made me remind me of something I wanted to talk to you about. Try Phantom.js, so you could render stuff without a browser.
For this, it's a good question. So how do you actually take a screenshot? How do you take a screenshot is one question, and you can use your OS tools, and you might come into some issues with the color not looking right, which happens to me on OS X because of the difference between the color profile of the monitor and the color profile of the thing. And I don't know how it works, but basically that's kind of weird. So screenshots are not easy, but if you want to take a screenshot of 10,000 web pages, you need to do it programmatically. And so how do you do that? So Phantom is one thing that I've heard of that I haven't used. I Googled around, and the first thing I saw that seems to be the meme for this now is a thing called Puppeteer. And with Puppeteer, you basically go and write a very short program that I can post. Actually, maybe I'll post that right now. And it basically, the commands, here, I'll even just look at this right now. Basically, the command involved here is you create a web browser. You create a page from that browser. These are just objects in your programming environment. You set the viewport, right? You set width equals 1200, height equals 1200, because it's 1200 by 1200 is the meme thing. You put the content of the page, and then you take a screenshot, and that's how it works. Now, I have a separate thing on here that I actually have to wait until a specific element has a class name on it, has a class on it, because I'm doing JavaScript to set up the page, which makes it harder. But it's a pretty simple thing. But what's not simple and what's hilarious, actually, if you want to actually get this to work, you can't just run a purpose-built command line browser. Because it won't work, right? It's not good enough. What you have to run is basically Chrome. And what this looks like, because I'm doing this at max parallelism, I'm running like 10 of these at once, is you see in my, I posted this it's one of the pinned tweets, in my dock, which is the macOS bottom bar thing, you see all of these browsers opening up, closing, opening up, closing, opening up, closing. So you see this like chaos of, user-facing activity based on what this command line script is doing, because there's no way to get the right screenshot in command line world, because you need the actual browser to work. It's pretty wild stuff.
And this Chromium is what Phantom.js uses.
Right. And I think I just thought there'd be a way to do the headless thing without me having to see the icons.
Puppeteer's a great,
Okay,
so I'm glad you
insane.
know all the tools and are automating. I missed that part, but
I literally found out about this like 2 days ago. Also, by the way, that's kind of why I'm into it. So it's like I'm getting like just recently kind of, but it's cool.
I guess my point with like the browser rendering stuff is like the web browser is like HTTP hypermedia text transfer protocol. Like any media you want to display is probably like Chromecast is so successful, I think, because it's like a very cheap device. It has like a video processor on it, and it's able to render web pages, and that's like the minimum UX you need for anything really. And like it just goes to a web page, and HTTP takes over. I think what is interesting in this conversation when you talk about snapshots of stuff, but I think of checksums being like the sort of a nice in between until you can get like, I don't know. So like a big problem I have with anything that's not an IPFS, I guess, is like the content of the data is not verified. You could change it on at any point. I guess like the lock contract thing is also a word, like somebody could always change the get base URI. But I think like I don't know enough to talk about like provenance hashes. I think we're part of a solution here with that. That I do think like a content hash might be at least useful for somebody on the other end that's not immutable to say, oh, I have the right data, even though I had to like reconstruct it from like archive.org or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I think you're making a very good point, which is that the content hash gives you more security in many cases than even on-chain data does, because when it's on-chain, unlike what we might say or whatever, not every on-chain contract has been, we're not all like the CryptoPunks data contract. Like the data contract that you get all CryptoPunks attributes and images from, that contract is so clean. It's got no NFT garbage in it. It's just a data thing. And the only transaction in it are them uploading the data, and they locked it after that. Now it can never be changed. Not everything is like that. There are a lot of contracts out there that are on-chain. And what if we need to fix this thing or whatever? So, there is kind of maybe a little bit of a misconception there where, when it comes to permanence, you have the permanence on the one hand, but what about the, desires, the even misguided desires of the owner, or even the mistake of the owner? There's always the possibility for mistake. Maybe I'll jump to just another brother Chuck. What's up? You've had your hand up.
Hey mate, I just wanted to say that on the Chia blockchain, they do content hashes for the data itself. So you've got 3 URIs, a metadata URI, which will have, like your JSON metadata. Your data, that's the metadata URI. The data URI itself is like the image.
Can anybody hear me? I can't.
Yes, we can hear you, but you might not be able to hear brother Chunk who's going. So yeah, it's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
And then there's the tell him to put his captions on if you can't hear me. Then he'll see that I'm talking. The other one is the license URI. All of those are hashed in the actual NFT itself. So when you've got the NFT, you can't go and change the data URI, which is kind of like having a provenance hash. But another good thing is that you can actually add URIs to the NFT. So just say you've got the IPFS gets unpinned or something happens and you want to upload a version of that image or that license file or that metadata to your own website, you can then add that URI to the NFT, and you start then going into, well, you can create your own permanence. You can then curate or get the permanence that you require for the NFT. It doesn't happen at a collection level. It happens at a individual NFT level, because for Chia NFTs, they become smart coins, not smart contracts. So every NFT is its own one of one, even though they can be linked in as part of a full collection. So in a way, you can do both. You can have the IPFS hash, the CID, saying that it can only be that CID, but then on top of that, you can have a SHA-256 hash of that embedded in the NFT. Well, not can have, it's a requirement of the NFT1 standard.
That's interesting. So let me ask this question. So Chia, first of all, I've been interested in Chia with the merge. It's been coming on my radar, thinking about it. I think one thing, it's interesting what you say, like to have that really built in. I think, but is there a mechanism, I'm curious about the mechanism if you want to have like a dynamic NFT, right, where, you have like the, you want to render as the image of a given NFT, you want to render like just like the current timestamp or something like this. And so, that dynamism of that, can't be, nailed down with the content hash, which is always changing. But is that, or is that like not allowed, or how does it account for that type of dynamic situation?
Yeah, I think that's the current issue with the NFT1 standard, but it doesn't mean that you can't create your own smart coins with stuff like that in it. And I think that the NFT1 standard was not rushed out, but it came out at a point which, with the current feature set, and there's more features coming. So I mean, it's quite a landscape to understand at the moment. I myself are just launching collections on Chia and trying to understand what the next step is to that. What I would probably say is something I've been thinking about on Ethereum is an SVG that actually takes input data somehow, so then the actual SVG doesn't change, and it's displaying timestamp information based on what the browser's giving it. But there's issues with SVGs currently showing up on the wallets and things like that too. So there's work to be done. It's quite early. I mean, the NFT standard, the actual way to mint NFTs and have NFTs on Chia only came out, maybe 3 months ago. So it is early days, but I still see a bright future in that, you're fighting against that provenance.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think it's also interesting, right? Like, yeah, content hash, like you can also go too far with the content hash. I think it's something it's not, right? Where, the content hash, the hash of the file gives you the fingerprint of that file and makes it impossible to change that file without changing the fingerprint. And, makes you able to validate any file out there as being the right file. But typically in life, though, you're not interested in just the raw contents of a file. You are interested in the way that file manifests to you or what it does, right? So if it's an image, it's just the raw content. It just sits there. But if it's an executable thing like JavaScript, then you probably don't care, especially if it's minified code. You probably don't care what the characters are of that code. You care what it does. And it is not one-to-one with the characters what it does. So this is one of the classic computer science that, Turing, completeness, and halting problem type stuff and all this thing where given a piece of code, it is impossible to figure out what it does. And so if there's JavaScript that shows you a pretty picture today, don't think that same JavaScript code will show you a pretty picture tomorrow. It might do something totally different. It's impossible to say what it does. And so content hash does not get you all the way there. It doesn't get you there to say this art is what I think it is, right? It gets you there to say the code is what I think the code should be, but you are not putting the text of the code on your wall. Probably if you are, then you're good. But if you're executing the code and putting the output of that on your wall or looking at it, then you're at square one, basically, because there is no way ever in a million years to determine what code does in a generalized way. You can sort of do it in some specific cases, but you can never bank on it. So, that's kind of the limit of the hash thing. And if you look at generative art, like, and even like the Yunks stuff that we were talking about, which is done generated with like just SVG filter, whatever, like, all of this stuff is like the coolest stuff anyway, where some crazy stuff happens. So, you're kind of in still some trouble here. But it's interesting. Yoke, what's up?
I wanted to add on to what Chunk was talking about because I'm also very much big Chia fan. The content hash verification, and I think Chunk mentioned as well. Like there's 3 different hashes you can put into the NFT that's immutable, and then you can append URLs. That's content, metadata, and license. I think I've heard people doing a workaround where, like, basically if you're doing if you wanted to do a post reveal, you could essentially like serve the correct content on the minter side, but then block all public access until it's all out. The content hash of what you're talking about, that makes total sense. Like, JavaScript doesn't produce, if it produces an image, is it going to produce the same image tomorrow? I think that goes back to like what we're talking about, like just like setups and stuff, like having the right Chrome browser and will this work indefinitely. Makes me think of WebAssembly as a kind of like maybe a binary static linked thing that we can like make sure it always runs as long as it's a web browser. But yeah, the content hash. So I guess like my point thinking is like we shouldn't just like think of it as just images and the content of that isn't what's there. Maybe it is a project that generates the image, or it's a bit of HTML, and you're hashing like an HTML, that's the link file, but that HTML page links to other things, so you're not necessarily hashing that. So you probably want to link to the root directory when you're doing content hash, and I don't know how that works. Probably still serves index.html, but that's all stuff that's like Chunk mentioned, it's in flux, but it's I think it's like a pretty good, like, I don't know about the SVG, like I haven't had issues with SVGs, maybe it's like a bug you should file, but I think there's a lot of power in that content hash, but you're making me think of like temporal performative works where there is media and you can't necessarily take a screenshot or a thumbnail of the entire thing, that's too costly. Or temporal, like a Game of Life where it's a random seed every time, you can't pre-compute every rendering. So I don't know how you like essentially would do that. With the Kim Bassendorf pieces I'm thinking about, like they have a random seed generation every time they're viewed. So that becomes interesting.
I mean, all these things eventually get a Wikipedia page, and there's some image on them. So the Game of Life has a thing on there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting though that you can't even know what it's going to be. Like there could be a multimedia generative whole thing, and here it is in JavaScript. But then, by the way, on my 40th birthday, which is very, very far away, by the way, on my 40th birthday, poof, it's going to change into something completely deranged and disgusting, or that's my prank, and so. Given that that's always the possibility, right? You just never know. You could wait until the sun burns out and then decide what the art is. You know what I mean? So it's like this is my problem with the content hash question, because you just don't know what it is that you are, hashing. If you don't know whether the art is what the art's going to do tomorrow, then being able to verify its authenticity. It's like its authenticity with what it's equal to what I don't even know what it is. So I think that's kind of an interesting. Brother, what's up? You got your hand up again.
Thanks, mate. I just wanted to add that with Chia smart coins, you could probably do something that that actually does change on your 40th birthday. So you could actually have the coin is ready to be spent, and then a new NFT gets minted from it, and coins can act on like block heights and things like that. So it almost could be a timed coin. So there are, I guess, we're thinking about it with an Ethereum brain, but I'm trying to kind of give you the Chia perspective. But coins could do that because there's actually code inside each coin. It's not coin.
Yeah, it's Turing complete, right? I think Chia is you can do anything. So yeah, I mean, maybe it's doing a different metaphor, a different structure of the coin thing. But yeah, you could do it. Sounds like you could do it with the coin thing there. You could do it on a smart contract level with Ethereum. You can, it's not just the question of can you do it, also it's can you do it in a way that no one could ever know? And the answer is definitely yes. And what does that mean? Like, I don't know, but it's I mean, Ethereum, it's like called not verifying a contract even. So So what else? What else we got? Who else we got? I mean, let's get a new new voice in here. We got a new person coming to stage. We got Dub. We got Piv. They're old voices, but I still like those voices. All right, who just came up here? We got
That was me.
Food.
What's up, guys? I heard Chia, and I'm like a developer as well in this space.
Oh
So,
no, this guy.
oh, well, like I have a question because like I literally just did a project with a team, and we did a 100% like on-chain NFT where we actually base 64 encoded the images into the blockchain, so like actually into the DB. And I'm just kind of curious as to the title. I'm just kind of like, the future of on-chain NFTs is off-chain kind of perked my interest. And to kind of touch on just quickly to touch on what Chunk had just mentioned, it's absolutely 100% possible to you can pretty much encode little scripts into SVG files, which then you could encode into the coins in Chia, into the smart contract part, and you can like kind of wrap it all together. So that's actually something that I think would be really interesting. Would be to have like NFTs that change with like a timestamp. So like maybe the background is nighttime at night and daytime during the day, and fall during fall and winter during winter. And yeah, there's a lot of little, I mean, that's kind of basic, kind of a basic like next level of primitive, I think, for what we're looking for. Like that requires kind of a data layer to store everything on, which is one of the next things coming up in the Chia roadmap. But yeah, like besides that though, yeah, you could do lots of little things. Like I was even thinking about like possibly doing like game levels. Like you could essentially, just code little game levels and sell them as NFTs, and you'd have to collect all the levels, to beat the game or the story. Yeah, there's lots of awesome little things. I think on chain is actually probably like for NFTs the future. So I'm just kind of curious as to like the whole what's going on. And yeah, sorry for kind of rambling on.
No worries. Thanks for your input. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. You can do more on chain if you switch chains itself. If you want to be on a different chain, you can obviously have more options, things that are more geared for it. But I don't know. I think off chain is the future. I'm not. In my bio, I have folk aletheologist. Aletheology is the study of truth. I don't think that things need to be on chain to be good. And I think that most things probably don't need to be on chain. Sorry to say, as a Capsule 21 contributor, I'm off chain pilled. Let's move on to Dao Bao. Welcome. What's up? I want to hear about this X copy thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm still sort of in the midst of trying to get more and more information, but I mean, if everybody understands, maybe you've watched that one of Xcopy's pieces sold at Sotheby's, I think 2 days ago for $500,000 at the Hammer. And then, I randomly happened to read a tweet from Skrilla Ventura. I can try to post this link to the chat in a minute after I've talked. But in it, Skrilla says that he was the original owner, that he minted this or bought this on Super Rare, that Super Rare has a royalties contract language that says the first original collector of a piece will in perpetuity get 1% of the proceeds of further sales. And he was just pointing out that he didn't get 1% of that sale. And he was pointing out, and then in subsequent conversations was discussing that, you don't have to honor a smart contract in a way. You don't have to honor the royalties in a contract. There are many ways in which a future buyer or a collector or a platform can get rid of certain royalties. And so that's basically the story. There's this wonderful sale that I think gives a lot of visibility to the NFT space. Not all of the I guess, rules, I guess is the word for it, are honored in the, from the original minting of the piece. And I just thought that was a really interesting thing. And I guess the interesting thing is, my viewpoint on it is that Web3 or NFTs as a kind of system or a rule of certification is kind of always at the whim of human desires and human functions. So it's like there's this idea that code is law, but like code is law is really at the whim of human whim. So I don't know how else to say it. So that's what that's all about. I tried to get a hold of Sotheby's. Nobody responded to my emails. But I'd love to know what Sotheby's did. I'd love to get into the weeds with them and figure out, like, okay, there's all this stuff that Super Rare claims for these contracts, but then how do you get around it? What did you do? And then, like, did you negotiate something? Because the first collector had no idea, and he obviously didn't get anything from it. So I don't know.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, I think that this is still like such a nascent tech and like a nascent culture, and people want to say things very matter of factly, but it kind of lack the foresight to say, however many years or months after we make Super Rare, we realize that, like, oh, actually, this thing that we were guaranteeing our artists and collectors isn't necessarily possible or enforceable or something that we can guarantee to them. And I think it's events like that that will kind of change how they word things and change what they promise, or hopefully change the check or change the tech, sorry, to be able to enforce these kinds of things. I'm not sure if that is possible, but, one of those two things has to happen, right?
Yeah.
Are you guys talking? Oh, sorry. I should raise my hand. You guys talking about like selling like fungible objects on chain? Is that like kind of what I'm hearing? Like, so Sotheby's sold a painting of an NFT?
No.
Sorry.
They
I'm kind of
an
confused.
actual
sold an
NFT.
NFT. They sold an X copy NFT.
They had a
Okay.
big auction yesterday. They had like an East. Sorry, I don't think you guys like summarized it, but just
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just like trying to catch up. Yeah.
I think they're talking about the Sotheby's auction yesterday, where one of his pieces, and I was just like looking at Daobao's tweets. Apparently, somebody bought the wrong one.
Oh,
I don't know what's going on,
sucks.
but I'm assuming it's talked. Sotheby's auction went over yesterday, and
No, well, there's a lot of so. I think since the original tweet, there have been a lot of other tweets questioning whether that was the correct one or not, and then it was later said yes, it was the correct one. So there's the whole point is the part that I was focusing on was the general idea that you have this concept called Web3, which is not really here. It's not something that, I mean, this is not Web3, right? There are these ideas of what Web3 can be. You have examples where things happen. Now, and again, I'm still researching this, you have things happen. And when these things happen, it brings up into question all of these concepts that seem to be truths about Web3 that are not truths about Web3. They, like, my whole point, whether it ends up being true or not, is that it is true that so I talked to a guy named John Borthwick, who is a VC investor. He was one of the very first people in 2014 at the 7x7 conference who minted a piece of work when Anil Dash was on stage with Kevin McCoy showing this NFT technology. Yes, Borthwick makes the claim that, NFTs are not really tech. NFTs are a system of tech uses that have not fully been realized. And that's really my point. Like, you have this sale at Sotheby's. There's the allegation that in Super Rare's contract, there's a 1% royalty given to the first collector. The sale happens, $500,000 at the hammer. Sotheby's gets a percentage. That's the price after Sotheby's gets their commission. What happens to the 1% that was in the contract? So I'm still digging but it is a good question, because this is not the only time, as from what I understand, where someone has claimed that there is a royalty that will be honored in a smart contract, but if it gets sold through a specific type of secondary platform, the royalty is not honored. So the simple point is, there are all of these examples where people claim Web3's code is law. Code is law is not really happening because humans are making decisions about what to do with code is law. So it's an interesting dynamic when you start dealing with tech that tries to make fundamental truths tangible, because it always gets confronted with the human use of fundamental truths. So that was really my point.
So yeah, so I think this is interesting, and I think definitely aligned with the current like anti-royalties meta, and I think there's a very true thing, which is the naive thing that I thought and bragged to people about too, like why Web3 is good, why you should think this is not a scam, like the naive thing about like royalties going to work in some way or better way here. That is, the blinders or the things are coming off for that. It's like pretty clear it's kind of a mess. Now, at the same time, that doesn't mean that you can just go around scamming people. And so if Super Rare made some kind of commitment here, and there's enough at stake for someone to like try to hold them to it, you can't just make a commitment and then try to wriggle out, especially if you're a company that makes a lot of money and just like you wriggle out of it because of the technicality, like, happens all the time if you're Google. I don't know if it happens if you're Super Rare, but yeah, I mean, I think the it's funny to bring this up though, because it's like a very clear example of like, as you say, the sort of, wool coming over the eyes of like, royalties don't actually work in this beautiful Crystal Palace way. But, also what happened this week is a way bigger thing in the vein of whether code is law. And that is something called the merge, which is to say there was a way that people made the most important decisions, every decision in Ethereum, including who owned what NFT, every single NFT, who owned everything, right? If there's a new quote unquote block, it's the blockchain coming out, there were all these rules that said, here is how you determine, what block goes in. And part of those rules are saying basically this is it. You can't just scam a new block in a different way. If you're doing a different way of putting a new block in, it's not going to work. You will never get a new block in this way. And then this all changed because we moved to a different blockchain because the people who are in charge, meaning the people who run Ethereum Foundation and the corporations who have the value that's in the blockchain made a decision. So the new blockchain has a lot of positive features afforded to it. The environmentalism thing is obviously number one, and the meta of that, which is no more criticizing Ethereum for environmental things, is also up there. But it's never been done before. It's controversial, and it has risks and downsides. And that was a decision that was made in a very centralized way. Now over the course of years and blah blah blah, whatever. The point being.
So yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
I'm just saying I've invited Skrilla to come join the space. He may come or not, I don't know. But yeah, the piece that sold was the real pace. He should be in the space. It would be great to get his sort of take on what happened. I think I've explained it pretty clearly. So if you want to give him the role of speaker, but please continue, Middlemarch, with your. I'm sorry for interrupting. Just please continue with your.
He's here. Well, if there's okay, well, I'll just the point is that you now have a situation where you are not only in you not only have to explain to someone, to yourself, how Ethereum works, you have to explain how this meta decision making process about when to fork Ethereum works. And a lot of times there are uncontroversial forks, whatever, but like the next fork might be one that you don't like, and so what is the way of figuring out what that's going to be and when it's going to happen? And likewise, in addition to understanding what the contract says or is supposed to say about royalties, you have to understand what it really says. The same thing is true of the whole thing. What does the whole thing really say? Critical function. What's up, my man? You've been waiting. Oh, and Skrilla's here too. So critical function, then Skrilla.
Yeah, just this. Maybe I don't know if someone had something that was direct now, but mine's related to the very outset of the conversation that you were looking for responses on. Should things be on chain, how they appear? So I don't know if you want to wait, and if anyone else has anything to say regarding this particular thing you're talking about now, and maybe I'll come back. I'll just jump in the shower.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's go to Skrilla, who is involved
But
in the
I've got something to
specific
say
situation,
later,
can
so
say
come back to
the
me.
truth, the single truth.
Yo, what's up?
Hey,
How y'all
Welcome. Good to meet you.
doing? Peace. Yeah, I don't know exactly. I was just talking to Dow about earlier, and then he just messaged me saying some people were sending some tweets around that it wasn't the real piece. I guess I need a little context before I weigh in.
So yeah, let me just give you the context. So what I'm trying to do is I was just trying to explain that you had been the first collector of this piece. This piece was then sold at a Sotheby's auction. As the first collector of the piece, according to Super Rare's terminology or contract terms or whatever you want to call it, you should have received 1% of the proceeds of that sale, I guess, in perpetuity, right? So you were just making the point, and I think that comes through in your tweets, that you didn't get the proceeds of that. And so I was saying that this is interesting because it calls into question this idea of code is law, and that platforms are not really, whether it's an off-chain platform, an on-chain platform, or whatever kind of thing, is not really honoring what the code is law dogma is saying. And then someone was alleging that there were tweets saying that the piece wasn't actually the real piece. I have not seen that. I don't know what that's about. But I just thought that as the person who was the first collector, you could at least give your viewpoint on what you think happened and like what you think it means for artists or collectors who are trying to like take the NFT space seriously and what they're up against in context like that.
Yeah, I mean it's something that's been happening for a while in this space that I mean I don't know how to unpack this. So I bought the original piece on a scribe. A scribe was I paid Ethereum for it, 1 Ethereum for it, and then several weeks later, a scribe, which was one of the first like crypto art platforms um, where you could mint, your artwork on there. It was not like minting like you think of now. It was more like well, it was. You collected the artwork, but it was like on their quote unquote contract, which, years now people have been trying to figure out where that contract even exists. But it was on a scribe.io. It was minted into the Bitcoin blockchain. I haven't seen, I know people are digging around trying to find where that piece was. Some people are even saying that a scribe might not have even really minted it in, or nobody really knows from what I can tell. And I know there's people digging because it's like a treasure hunt because there's like millions of dollars of X copies, out there possibly. When I bought his piece, it was the only one of one on the platform. He had additions and other stuff. So I mean, I guess I bought the first one of one X copy at that time. And then the platform folded a few months later, maybe a couple months later. He hit me up and was like, yo, I didn't even realize it had folded. You know what I mean? He hit me up. He was like, yo, I'm going to mint this on Super Rare. Me and him had both already minted on Super Rare at that time. And I was like, oh, cool. All right, transferred over. He's like, I'm going to alter it a little bit and send it to you. So he did that. So the version that I bought on a scribe is definitely like a little bit different. It's the same, but so the colors are a little different. There might be a little grainy effect that's different. It's essentially the same, but not really, right? So the way I looked at it, and I've talked to Xcopy several times about it over the years, and that is that me and him have a agreement that token that he gave me, that artwork, was the exchange for the artwork I bought. With that said, then and the heat of Xcopy running up and prices going crazy last year, I had a number of collectors DMing me telling me that they would pay me, 6 figures or more for my login to Scribe, and do I have the email, and they're asking me all these questions, and I definitely hit up Xcopy to be like, this is what's happening. I still, I honor Xcopy's request that this is what it was. We swapped it 1 for 1. Does the other one exist? Yes, but I don't know where. So essentially, it doesn't exist. I mean, it existed, I guess. It was never. It was pre all this stuff, all this hype. Now, you know what I mean? Like this was like early on. Xcopy was just a a digital artist, and he had just learned about minting. It wasn't called minting anyways, tokenizing, a certificate of authenticity into the blockchain, and they had a picture of the departed work, which really you can go on Imgur and find the departed work that I bought. And that's where, it had like 10 million views already by the time I think I even bought it. Or millions of views at least. And so I view that as like, that's what it was. Now he's told some of his early collectors that, if somebody does find the ascribe keys and then he would make people, make sure that the people that bought it were rewarded with them, not some like treasure hunt diggers. But that again is like neither here nor there, because I don't think it's going to happen. With that said, then the super rare piece in 2020, or I think sometime in 2020, Super Rare implemented collectors royalties, where it was to make, probably anyway, I wasn't involved in the talks, but I imagine it was to make people sell artwork more, like make it more liquid, where you don't have to hold on and wait for a piece that you think is going to be very valuable. If you want to let it change hands and know that down the line, if it does ever become like that grail piece, then you would be rewarded with a first collector royalty of 1%, and I believe the second creator royalty of 50%, a third collector royalty of 25% down the line. So what this did, and it, as far as I can tell, I'm not getting my royalty. I've talked to super rare people about it. I messaged the seller and got no response. And it seems like, I got dicked out of my royalty, which, like Dalbow was saying, is what the problem with royalties kind of is, and that, me being somebody has been around making minting art since 2016, royalties didn't even come into play until 2 years after I started minting. So it was never really a thing with us. We were, it wasn't that big of a deal to me, to be honest with you. Like, I know a lot of people started coming in 2020 and 2021, and, they were being influenced in by, big collectors and marketers, saying that the reason you want to do this is because you get perpetual royalties of forever. But I think that the main thing that you should come in here for, and we can see time and time again, because royalties get skirted all the time, is that it's for provenance, chain of custody. Like that's like the main thing that you should be minting your artwork for, in my opinion. Like that's the special thing of the blockchain. There's smart contracts to do this and that, but royalties are good, but they're only as good as your collector. As we can see, I've had a number of pieces sell on super rare, and then on the secondary market, if a flipper buys it or something, they'll go and sell it on OpenSea, or they'll, before OpenSea honored the same contract, and then they've also done OTC deals where all you got to do is, transfer it to somebody, and the royalties are, nobody sees the royalties. So, like I said, royalties are only as good as a collector. They are not built into anything, really. You can't make them built in, because if you make a royalty built in, then anytime you transfer your piece from your wallet to your wallet or whatever, any kind of transfer to a gallery, whatever, you're going to be paying a royalty on that, which just, that's the opposite of free market and, the idealism of what blockchain is. And so it doesn't make sense at the end of the day. And I think, like, really you can go in and you can listen to Theo Goodman or read some of Theo Goodman's pieces, who's been writing kind of like skeptically about artist royalties for years. And with all that, and he's done some good pieces. With all that said, what I'm trying to tell you is that I think royalties are good. Like, I mint my one of ones generally on ETH so that I can get the royalties. Not everybody's honored them, but that's the idea. Because then if I sell a piece, I know I can sell a piece for, whatever I think, partial of what my worth, what I think might be. Like what I, would sell like a Bitcoin piece for. I can sell it and be like, all right, change hands. Because that's, at the end of the day, like the type of artist I am, I want to just make art and get it into people's hands. I don't want to just sit on it and speculate on it, wait till it becomes like $1 million. It's not really my thing. Like I think artists should most real artists want to fucking have that shit, collected by somebody, and for the value of them, making them, happy or sad or whatever the fuck. So, you could sell something. I just put up a artwork today on Twitter, the last post I put up, and that's like one of my worst paper hands I've done. It's one of my favorite pieces I did, and I sold it for like $700 or something, which was far below my market value, quote unquote, whatever the fuck that means at the time. And the person who owns it, I don't know who owns it or anything, but hopefully when they sell on the secondary, like it goes for more, and say they sell it for $7,000, then I would see another $700 off of that. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like the idea of like having royalties. Like Matt Gazer's another good example, or Matt Kane's Gazer's another good example, where he got his Gazers came out in during the bear cycle in the market last year, and I think a lot of people thought that they would mint out at like 5-6 ETH a piece. They didn't start minting out until really about 0.25. I think a couple minted at 0.5. One person bought it a little bit more, but the majority of them went for 0.25 ETH at the time, which was far below what Matt's pieces were going for. And so it made sense that those all got minted out for, the collectors got good prices, and then the secondary volume, Matt gets all the royalties as they've gone up in value. Now, I don't know what the floor of those are now, but last I looked, it was like 12 or 14 ETH. So now they're worth at, kind of more of what Matt's values at. And so it makes sense for that. But again, I have some Gazers. I could send anybody in here the Gazers and skirt the royalties if I wanted to. But what I guess I'm trying to roundabout say is that the royalties are just like the real world. It's only as good as your collector. Like even on XCP, I have a piece that sold for over $1 million in Bitcoin, and I sold it for $50 in 2016. There was no royalties, anything. But the collector who bought that was kind enough to send me some royalties in the form of rare Pepe cards, which he knew I was trying to collect a certain set, and it just like gifted them to me. It's like, here you go. Thanks for, I made a ton of money, and here's my gift to you. And that's kind of like no matter what, you kind of got to have this relationship with your collector, I think, to get those royalties generally, because still people will be on the market, and if they don't respect who you are as an artist or your relationship, then they can skirt the royalty system. And so that's what's happened here.
Wow, thank you. That's a wild story, and actually some of that background that you give really helps. I hope it helps people understand the mentality of the artists who have been in the space for a long time. So that's really amazing that you gave us that background. Did anybody want to say anything on that? Like, I think Skrilla basically said what needs to be said, which is that it's kind of like what Dove was saying, like it's amorphous, right? It's like the space is changing very fast. We don't actually know where the technology arc takes us, and the technology arc, even if we're dealing with art, is going to be molded by human intentions. And
so let me ask this question, just in this specific, and that was, I think, a really, super helpful, wide-ranging perspective. And as Zabao says, like, I am myself personally, as are probably some of these people in the room, like, pretty new to this whole thing. All the metas kind of washed over us in this, flashing lights kind of way, but to sort of see the arc of how this, started. It wasn't even called minting, and then the arc of the royalties thing, and then there's like maybe some, as you mentioned, the sort of case where the royalties were really helpful. I forget the artist's name, going from 0.25 to 12. I just have kind of a specific question. In this case, and probably they were going to say, like, because it's southern, it's like people getting involved at this level, maybe it's just like pure business, like we don't have to pay this person, screw them. But like, is there, in terms of the exact mechanism by which you would get paid, is it the case? I thought you said that is it the same NFT specifically, or is it just the same, image as it evolved? And I understand that's like not like the most
I get
very 2022 way to look at it versus how it actually evolved. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So yeah, it's not the same for sure. Like there were two different mints, 100%. But like I said, neither time were they called a mint. Like back in the super rare time, I don't think we were calling them mints. We're calling them tokenizing your artwork. And prior to that, it's a few months before that, Ascribe they did it a little bit different. I don't know exactly, and that's the thing, man. Ascribe was a new technology that came out, and nobody really knew what they were doing. It was just the fact that, I'm sure that you know a little bit, but it's basically like, here, this art is on Ascribe, Ascribe.io. You can go there and see their landing page where they kind of like gave their resignation letter, and their idea was earlier than what most marketplaces ended up doing, like Rare Art Labs and Ascribe, both on Bitcoin and on Ethereum, saw this potential, which kind of came from like Rare Pepe Marketplace and came from Spells of Genesis and came from CryptoPunks to a degree as well. So people saw that people wanted to collect digital art, but they didn't know the means of how to make it really work. And that's all I think this is that it was such an archaic thing that people have started to get it right. I don't think we're even all the way right yet, obviously. Like, I think I see the name of this, on-chain NFTs and off-chain, and I think that's a good topic for sure. There's, you know, even with that though, I mean, you can get rid of a blockchain. There's, and then it's on-chain where, so like at the end of the day, all this shit is a social consensus, in my opinion, and it's kind of what between, at least for this piece, me and Xcopy decided that this was the piece, the second piece. First piece disappeared. We didn't think about it like, in several years this piece might be worth more because it disappeared and da da da. It's kind of like become that, but at the end of the day, the piece was what it was, the second piece. So it is two different tokens, yes, but it weren't even tokens. Like the Ascribe one, I don't even think you can call it a token. It was more just like writing it into the Bitcoin blockchain. You weren't rewarded a token with that. I think they gave me like a hash. I'd have to go through my emails and stuff, but they might have given me like a hash. They might not have even done that. I can't remember. It might have been on my Ascribe page. Like at the time, you only could view it in your Ascribe like profile, which doesn't exist anymore. So it's hard for me to really recall how that looked. So your answer is hard to answer, but yes, it's two different things, but they weren't both tokens, I don't think, either. The super rare token was a token, which again, now we're on to like, artist token contracts with like Manifold and all these other things. Like this was minted on the super rare ERC20 token standard before even 721. So like if you look on Etherscan, you'll see it under ERC20 as a SPR or SUPR token with the number after it, like numbered like 57 or something like that, or 121 or whatever. And that's how those looked at that time.
That I think is also just super. And I was just even looking up what Ascribe is, which I still don't totally know. It's fascinating, as you say, it's shut down. So that's another question about like, the Web 2 thing. So you can't see the profile page, and the way things were represented and talked about on that site is probably very relevant to conversations about the social intent of what was going on. We can't see that. That's lost. But I think the platform, as I understand it, right, is sort of a proto Ethereum-esque thing where it's Bitcoin, so you can't actually have tokens or NFTs, but you can.
You can though. You totally. We already had. I had already minted like 50 to 100, quote unquote NFTs by that time in 2018 using Bitcoin. So I've minted 150, 200 tokens on Bitcoin at least.
But
probably
isn't
more
that through?
This is
like,
great.
I guess.
Oh, okay. You can
Go. Okay, I was just going to say, like, I guess so. The mechanism there, I guess there are Bitcoin L2, but in the end, the Bitcoin blockchain itself, all you can do is like, write a hash to it, write a summary of something that happened somewhere else, and so you couldn't have like a
you use the op return.
Right, and so what I'm trying to say also is I think that's like fine. It's like I agree with you. It's a social the social construct. So you couldn't have like an open sea of that because you can't have one contract reading who owns what. But maybe you don't need that because again, even OpenSea itself is built around just a social understanding and a social convention of what's happening. And so I think really what's just so important when you hear something like this backstory and even just looking at Scribe is just to think, okay, you're so, and I'm talking to myself here, you're so into the majestic beauty of ERC 721 NFTs, and you are saying like, oh my God, how could you ever do an ERC20 or worse still, not even have a token? It's like the thing you are using today will be looked back on, as a primitive thing. And so based on that, if you're trying to derive any like capital R, rights or any super serious thing, you got to understand that it's not only like, oh, like people aren't going to respect the code. It's like people won't even think of the code as being like legit. Like it'll just look like some weird proto, evolution thing. And I think the mint verbiage, I think is just really fascinating, this concept, because the old verbiage kind of made more sense, right? Like kind of like, okay, we're establishing, the digital record, whatever, but then mint, makes it sound like you're making money. And so, I think that kind of just, changes, you can sort of think like, well, why weren't people thinking more like they do now back then? It's like, we weren't even calling it mint. People were just not thinking about this in this way. So don't like universalize.
You weren't
that. So,
even
yeah,
calling
I
it.
love
You weren't
that.
even calling it NFT at that time either. It was, rare digital art or blockchain art, etc. So, the term NFT is a financial term. It comes from finance talk, non-fungible. That's from the financial field. It's like there was a whole like nifty battle back in 2018 where many of us weren't favorable about the word, period. There was a patent war going on over it. Axiom, CryptoKitties, all that was involved, and it split a lot of camps up, like on the Ethereum side and all types of stuff. People are trying to come up with verbiage for it, and I think the word NFT just doesn't make sense, period, because not everything is an NFT, especially when we're talking about older tokens.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I think
that's really fascinating. Thanks for like coming up here and sharing. I don't know. I think it's knowledge that most of us, I don't want to speak too broadly, but I think most of us don't have. I think like most people in this space do not have this knowledge, so it's kind of rare. But I also appreciate it because it affirms this thing that I have been beating my drum about for the last couple of weeks and saying in every freaking space that I can, which is that the social consensus layer is the most important thing. Out of all the things, what's more important than the blockchain? What's more important than like what the tech says is true? Like Dao Bao was saying, no such thing as code is law. The law is whatever is mutually agreed upon truths. Whatever like most people believe to be true kind of becomes the truth. And that's a fascinating like case for it. Looking back before we had all these terms and ways of considering things, like before we had the non-fungible token as a premise and you would want to buy digital art, if you gave the artist money and they told you that it was your art now, there was no certificate for that or nothing that was like veritable beyond, the agreement between the artist and the collector. And I think that is very fascinating. And people in this space kind of forget that there are ways that the world can operate without the need for blockchain consensus of, a history of quote unquote facts. But we've had Yoke and Michael holding their hands super patiently. I don't know which one of you is first, but I want to get to you guys as well.
Michael is first. If he's ready, I could go too.
Yeah,
But
go
I don't
for
know,
it.
brother, if he's had his hand up because I've had trouble hearing him. I still see him as a speaker. But I'll just go ahead. I think I resonate with what Skrilla you've been saying. Like collectors are definitely, at the end of the day, what's going to matter. You touched on some like very critical parts of it. It's like it was a transfer to the other wallets, so they bypassed like any royalty taking mechanisms, which aren't even part of like 721 contracts or 1155s, which is the majority of like what people think of NFTs. I also was the person asking about, like, I made the bad inference of saying, oh, is this the fake one? Because I was like trying to get context. My bad. I didn't mean to like freak anybody out. That wasn't said other than here. And I apologize for, because I knew I didn't have the right context, but I didn't realize what I was saying may have been more controversial than I realized. So I really just was looking for more context. So apologies there. And then the one thing I think was missing with the, like, Sotheby's didn't do anything on chain. They didn't like take the money on chain. Of course, they're not going to enforce anything if they're just bypassing, probably with the same transfer function. So I think that's like a critical point that I think we should be critical for Sotheby's metaverse, quote unquote, for. If you went to their website, it was like, I think very nice tech. It was like very like fast. You know, it's very reactive. Like I think they have like, you know, a great platform. They've been building shit for like years, but they're coming in and like saying, okay, we're just going to bypass everything like we've done in the past, even though we have a label metaverse, and we're going to utilize these community members that know like artists that we can sell the works of to these people of our audience. So it's a double-edged sword of like they're bringing in people potentially.
It's
Maybe.
it's complete bullshit too, because Sotheby's, this would have, like, I was talking to the leads, the owners, etc. of Super Rare, and everybody agrees that this would have sold for 2 to 3 times more on Super Rare than Sotheby's. So, and that's the case with all these auction houses. The auction houses, you know, I don't understand why people take this stuff to auction houses. I really don't. I guess I assume the collector who, you know, Max Stealth is, you know, he's not very, from what I understand, talking to other artists, he isn't very communicative with any artist really. So I don't know what his intentions are, or what intentions are for these people to take this stuff over there, unless they work for them or they want to influence them somehow. I just don't understand it, because you're losing money. You're breaking breaking the provenance and the contract that was made on Super Rare or whatever platform. So it all is kind of confusing to me.
Yeah, it seems bizarre to me, right? Because, like, you know, of all the problems with NFTs, this seems to be one good thing where, like, if you have a super expensive, like, physical painting, you probably need some kind of special protocol, an auction house or whatever. You can't sell Picasso, you know, or whatever meme painting, Klimt. You can't sell, like, a Picasso on your website, right? But you can sell the NFT, and you can do it in a way that, for better or for worse, like, basically, and there are problems too, basically it's going to work. And so why go through all of the hassle of pretending it's some physical thing? You know, you can sell it on the internet. So yeah, I think that's a very, very fascinating thing. I'm just basically literally just saying, yeah, it'd be interesting to know the answer to that.
I spoke to the artist, Thank You X, who's a traditional artist who's kind of been moving in Web3 for, I think, like a year or so now. And I just like cold DM'd him because he was auctioning a work via the auction house Bonhams, which is like a New York based auction house. It's kind of like third tier Sotheby's Christie's, like just like a little bit worse than those are. And he said that he didn't like using these auction houses, and he didn't like using Nifty Gateway, which I also kind of called him for using, and was kind of questioning why he would want to use that. And interestingly, he got a little upset with my question. I guess that's fair. I was like cold DMing him to be like, hey, you should use a custom contract. But I thought I was being helpful. His answer basically was that these auction houses and, you know, platforms like Nifty Gateway, which are a little closer to traditional art than what we think of like Super Rare Foundation or something, he liked using them because they are very helpful to you, not in terms of selling the work, but in your life as an artist. You know, if you have an in with Sotheby's, then you have a contact there. You have a personal phone number of someone who works at Sotheby's. And if you need a phone number, if you need any of these things, now you kind of just are buying yourself connections. You're going to sell for less, but you gain a lot of clout, you gain a lot of connections, you gain this on-ramp into being taken, quote unquote, seriously as an artist, unquote, right? So that's, and I spoke to my friend too, who works at the Brooklyn Museum and at the Sculpture Gallery in New York City, and I was picking his brain about this issue as well. But that seems to be kind of the common consensus of like why trad artists do that, and why trad artists who are moving into Web3 continue to move in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think hearing you say it, it's quite obvious, really, that you get some of the side benefits. But it seems like it should just be way less. But yeah, very interesting stuff. Critical, you're back, you're ready. Let us have it, please.
Oh, hey, and I'm literally walking out the door, but I was still going to listen. Grabbing something. Yeah, but going back to this thing about like how the image looks on different servers, and is it such a big deal to be on chain or off chain? I think like, I don't know if you're familiar with how artists. I have a friend who was really concerned about how art looks on Instagram and online, and he was saying that people were deliberately, painting a way for it to look a specific style or to look good online because they knew it would change. If that makes any sense. And thinking we're talking about Middlemarch, about how we, is it such a big deal? And Dovetail was saying that he wishes he had done it another way, and he wished he had done something like, you need to view it in a different filter. If you go to a gallery, or if you're buying art from somebody like digital art, oftentimes it says this, ultimate viewing. And even with films and stuff, ultimate viewing is viewed on such and such format. And if you're going to display it in a gallery, and if you're going to be serious, then that's the sort of thing you would say, right? So I mean, if you want to just sell 10,000, 10K PFP or do things like that, then you probably shouldn't care about that sort of stuff. But if you want, if you're doing it a little bit more seriously, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with being really specific about that and saying that. And galleries, they do say that. And my friend had this whole, like, his whole PhD thesis, and I actually helped him with it. He's one of my best friends. He's like family. And his PhD was called Survival Aesthetics, and it was about how to survive in this digital era. And he was telling me that there are artists that are on Instagram, because everybody went to Instagram, and he was from Tumblr as well. And he was saying how he really thinks about, because he's a painter and he does all different mediums. But he was saying that people really choose color and choose different things, determining how they're going to look, on Instagram. It's such a big deal how that things will present online, that they would be adapting that way. So then, considering that, I think about what Middlemarch was saying, how maybe we should be more flexible, and instead of complaining that the thing doesn't fit in the hex or it doesn't look great online, it's up to the artist to really work with that. But that's what I wanted to mention, from the beginning of this conversation. That's all.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. In my Moon Lake series, I did, because that's something that's very strange and like dynamic. It's like a kind of a moving and kind of, it's a weird thing, right? It can't be displayed properly. But in the token description for Moon Lake, I did put very specific gallery instructions for how it should be. If you want to display this in a physical space, here's how it needs to work, and here's how it needs to look. And I think that if it ever reached the point where people decided that they were going to take the 10Ks that I and Middlemarch have created together, Cyberfunks and Yunks, seriously as like works of art, then I would also have very specific instructions for like how to display this SVG in a physical setting, or like if you want to display it on a screen, or if you want to display it as like a metal print or what have you. It's super interesting to consider for sure. But I think if you are taking yourself seriously as a digital artist, you really should be thinking about these kinds of things, and how you want it to be viewed, and what is the optimal artist intent viewing. That's super important.
And I think for this new project that I'm working on with Piv, I'm trying to like explore the idea that the mechanism for doing this should be the HTML file that you're allowed to do in OpenSea, and just the way to think about it. In other words, you should be able to ask a person or a gallery or anyone to be able to show something a web browser can show, and if you're talking about digital art, and that should be the behavior that appears, whatever loads in that page. And then there should be another way to do something for, the book that comes with the gallery, thing, and that should be another form of art on the NFT. But I think the primary thing, should be, and you can present it in any way you want using this thing. That is it. And then say, okay, you want to put it in on Cyber, you got to render this this page. But that
And another thing, Middlemarch and Dove and everybody, that I think it's really funny because this, I don't know if it was the title, but it really attracted the cheer crowd, like Chunky here and someone else came in, which was pretty interesting. So I was thinking about that too, like while Chunk was talking, and I was thinking, like, I remember Dove saying how he's going to stick to Ethereum because he had some people telling him that he should have done this on Tezos or something like that, all these different platforms where you could get a different crowd, right? And then maybe that makes a difference for sales. But I was just thinking during listening to Chunk speak and the other person who came up, Foods, I think it was, that in terms of art, and then when you get to the gallery level, like if you're going to do it this way, no one's going to really care about the platform or that thing in that depth that maybe some of us nerds here get really into. Like it's like, okay, this is a digital asset, whatever best way you can use that tech, like so Chunk was saying, like within that tech you can do all these different things. If you're playing with a medium in any particular way, that's kind of what's important. And I think that the way where you mint it or the way you create it just purely comes down to how you want to sell it, and that idea of consensus that Dove was talking about. So like if you actually want to get max sales or kind of eyeballs, then maybe Ethereum is the way for the moment, or if you in a certain crowd, like Skrilla with the Bitcoin people, and you want that remain that kind of sort of clout or culture, then you just do it on Bitcoin because that's your scene, that sort of thing, and that has certain respect or credit with it. But if you're going to do like a digital art show and everyone rocks up to like this is an NFT work, when it comes down to it, I don't think it matters so much just to be saying, oh, it's a Chia NFT or it's an Ethereum NFT or something like that. At the moment, anyway, like that's just how I think it's viewed, and still, these people are not paying that much attention at all to NFT. So, it's I don't know if how you want to sell it might come to determine what platform you put it on.
Yeah, definitely.
No, for sure. Let's hear from some. Or go ahead, Dove. Sorry.
No, I think we were going to say the same thing. We have Yunks here, Chunk, Rhyming.
Let's do it.
Yoke as well. Go for it.
Hey guys. Hey Yoke, what's going on, man? How's it going,
Not
bro?
much. Good night. Great night.
Yeah. Hey,
welcome.
this is specifically kind of for Shrilla. I minted also in 2018, 2019 on the Bitcoin blockchain, and back then we did it for provenance of actual artwork, right? We were doing. They basically gave us like a QR code that we would print out. And it really wasn't like, I never heard of NFT, right? I was a digital artist and a painter. And this place like Shepherd Ferry's a friend of mine. And so he minted. And then my wife said, oh, your buddy minted with these, or they didn't say minted, but they said it was for provenance, right? So she goes, oh, well, your buddy just did this. You should do some of your pieces, right? Because this is like the new thing and you're doing art. And we were like, oh, okay, because so we did it. We did our pieces. We got our certificates, and we were like, okay, what else? What else is going to happen? So we go on OpenSea and like, oh, they have these little thing called CryptoPunks. Well, how much are they? $7, $7.50. And I'm like, oh, well, let's put some art up. I'm like, how much can you sell it for? Oh, they're trading for 75 cents for a JPEG. And I'm like, dude, I can't pay my bills. So I said to my wife, whatever, man. Then all of a sudden, like Mark Cuban comes on last year. I don't know if you guys remember him coming on and saying, oh, this is the new wave and everybody got to jump on crypto and all this. Totally blew up. Everything got out of perspective for the original people that did it. So Shrilla was like, what the hell, right? So you start going, I was just like, this was like digital art, man. And you guys are like new names and all this kind of stuff. It was really frustrating back then because we were doing this to not, because I was selling art, right? In the real gallery world. And I thought, oh, well, this would be a cool thing to add tech to it. But we weren't looking at doing this to go back to Christie's and to go back to a gallery and try to like have them accept us, because I took digital art in those places and they looked at me like, oh, dude, you're like, get back to your Amiga Pro, bro, back in the day. And you're like, I've been pixels my whole life. And I've always tried to bridge the real art world with digital art because I love the two, right? I mix it in. I do digital art on my computer and then I screen print it onto canvases like Warhol did. Because I worked with the Warhol Foundation back in the day, and there was so much politics with museums and computers. We wanted something different. And I don't know if a lot of people know, like when me and Paulie were coming up with Funkism, it was truly about dudes like everybody in this room, like Middlemarch and Dovetail and Yoke and Piv. You would do your art. We could sell it to each other, collect it, sell it to people that dug our stuff, get money, pay my bills. For literally the last year, I've been selling crypto. It goes on a credit card. I go to the grocery store, but in 2018 and 2019, you would go into a place and you'd be like, do you guys accept Ethereum? And they give you that, like, that face, right? I mean, anyway, man, I feel you, Skrilla. Like, you talk about a quantum leap in the last year. Like, it's just mind blowing. I just like look at some of the stuff, like people like trying to get back in the galleries. I mean, I'm in Web3 in New York. I don't know if you guys heard of that place, but it literally, like, I'm in galleries in New York already. Then I try to do digital art and sell it on Bitcoin blockchain back in the day. Nobody wants the shit. And then now people are putting it back on a screen, taking it back to New York. It's like, for me, it's been funny as shit. But I really appreciate you guys putting this topic up. I feel you, Skrilla, man, with this whole like rewards program for digital art, all this bullshit they've been like selling all these kids for the last year. But much love to everybody dealing with this stuff. I know, as I always say in rooms, there's brilliant minds in these rooms, and you guys will figure it out for the betterment of artists and for people that want to be sovereign and pay their bills and not have nobody coming in being a parasite on their life. So God bless everybody, man. You guys keep it real, and thanks for doing this and keep being creative. And yeah, and if you like funkism, you want to freaking like support artists for artists, keep that shit up, man. I know I do it all the time. I don't really care what color background you got on your PFP. I still love you. I still love pixels. So thanks, man. I appreciate y'all. Love.
I appreciate you, Nux. Thanks for
Yep.
sharing your perspective.
You bet, bros. Thanks a lot, man. And Skrilla, good luck with all that royalties crap. But
we
I
should
felt you when you were saying it.
DM at some point. I'm like moving to New York City to do more art stuff this month. So I'm curious about what you were talking about, Web3 or whatever. We should link up or something.
Yeah, Web3. I'm actually in Malibu Canyon. I'm out here I'm in the left coast, but I've spent so much time, and I have gallery shows and stuff. I used to do the art fair back in the day at the Javits Center. And that's how I ended up, working with the Warhol Foundation back in the day with his brothers, because his nephew was there selling his work. And so I met Andy's brother, and we ended up becoming friends and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, he died. And then we worked with getting that museum going and stuff, because the family didn't know too much about screen printing and stuff. But like I said, man, I appreciate everybody. And Dove, yeah, anytime you want to talk, I love all you guys' work. I've been a fan in this space for so long, but I haven't been a fan of the snake oil salesmen showing up and selling their shit to these kids, making something up like they just invented it. But between Yoke and all these people that are super smart, you guys can figure it out. That's what I love about you guys, because this room is what Web3 is. It ain't on your TV set. It ain't on CNN. It's right here, right here. You guys are Web3 because you can make it the way you want to. Like a few of us are. And we ain't gonna be on the big screen, man, but we'll keep doing what we love. So all right, man.
Definitely.
Love the y'all, bro.
Let's to Chunk and then Yoke and Whale, and we're at like 2 hours 15 minutes, so let's try and keep it brief. Sorry, but yeah, go ahead.
I'll try and keep it brief. On-chain royalties for NFTs is actually one of the other features of the NFT 1 standard. I know I'm kind of like drinking the big fat old Kool-Aid when it comes to Chia. I've been infatuated with it, and I think the only thing kind of keeping me back in Ethereum is probably you guys doing this stuff and some other projects that are fun to play in. But for Chia, royalties are actually built into the coin. So when you do sell it or you take an offer, you actually have to pay royalties. It's not in on the marketplace, which is how it is for Ethereum. With that said, there are people creating contracts with royalties built in. So I'm not saying that, I hate Ethereum for it. It just wasn't something that was built into the start, which I think needs to get more light shed on it. And
but you can transfer the coin for free. If there's any way to transfer the coin for free, then you can always figure out a way to get around the royalties. Am I mistaken?
Of course.
In that?
Yes, of course.
So
of
yeah,
course.
it's the same.
It's nothing getting around. 100%. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. That's probably more the consensus, the social consensus. But I think that the use case for royalties are when sold, not to your friend, because that's a trust model that you need to do that to transfer it, and then in the hope that you'll get money back, or you've got money and then you have to be trusted to send it back. If we're talking about a trustless environment or a trustless transaction, then royalties need to be paid. Obviously, in a space where we're all friends and we're sending things to each other, it doesn't happen. But I guess the use case is in a trustless transaction that you do pay royalties, and that's not up to a third party. And then the last one was actually a point that Critical made about having your art being able to be displayed in a certain way. I drew a parallel to people mastering music and people saying, well, you have to change. And I don't know much about music production, but I've just heard people say this. They're like, that this song's been mastered or has been mixed so you can hear it in your car, so you can hear it in the radio. And you start looking at things like color profiles and how do you actually have, like, what color Kelvin light do you have to have on a screen so then you can actually understand and know that the colors are true representations. You start talking about color management and then curation, and then when you display art, what color Kelvin light do you have to have for just painting on the wall, and what kind of environment do you need to be in? What color wall behind it does it need to be for you to take the artist's true vision and be able to see it? And I agree that on OpenSea, with its small little box, with its white background, maybe not dark mode, maybe dark mode, it doesn't do it. So I think there's a way to go. I think that things like on Cyber, I think that trying to get places that actually show you the art the way that the art was intended. Maybe it wasn't at all, but if it is, then these people are missing out. But it is happening in other industries. I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm just trying to point out another example.
For sure. Yeah, those are good points. I'll have to look more into the Chia stuff because I am very anti anything that's not Ethereum, and I'm very anti Ethereum as well. But
it's cool. Fair call. I like your healthy skepticism, and
Yeah.
I'm here to just push it through into your brains.
For sure.
Because I like what you guys are doing, and I'm always up here. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you. The osmosis is good. What's up, Yoke?
Well, I'll go ahead, say I'll echo Chunk in saying, thank you for throwing these spaces and like critical talk around this stuff. Wanted to thank Nunks for the kind words and wanted to echo it back to you.
Am I rugging? Is he speaking?
Yeah, you're probably.
He's speaking. Put your
All right.
captions on critical.
Or just like go to listening and come back up. That also helps. But somebody could relay that. But real quickly, I would like to add to that, the function of on-chain enforcement of royalties, the Sotheby's metaverse, like very much made in social consensus, which Chunks was saying, but to not use it. But I think this is a solved thing if we look at the chain, and there is license as well on the Chia standard, so that you could say, like the artist has this like implicit. Like if you don't sell it through an offer file, we're going to reissue it, or I have the right to reissue it. And then that's like a content hash. And then there's metadata that's content hash. So maybe they could like, I don't know. But so then I think there's a bigger issue to talk to when we talk about identifying people. So like a DID standard that I think will be cross-platform sort of solves for this provenance issue. And then there's I guess like the only other thing I wanted to echo from Chunk was like saying is what I was thinking about with WebAssembly, like being able to ship something that's like a native execution of showing the art exactly how it should be, and it's like a if you ship a static I don't know if anybody's nerdy enough here to like ship static binaries, but they basically are just like these things that will execute on the machine's architecture under an OS, like probably forever, because they basically ship with everything they need to run, and they just like run machine code. But I think the WebAssembly like idea is sort of like I've seen crazy stuff like AutoCAD move their entire software over into the web browser just using WebAssembly, and I mean they wrote it in C++, I believe. But I think there is like interesting things that you could think of when, I don't know, if we settled in the future on this like distributed file system that's like probably it's sort of you can be augmented and you can like expatriate it, but it also is in this file format that sort of constitutes in what it is to be this piece that we like look at as art. But that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Love it. I'm not sure. I think it probably went over my head. Maybe Middlemarch knows what you're talking about, but I'm too smooth brained.
Yeah, I mean, I think, always the how much can you embed everything? I think it's a good question. I think in the end, there's something you can't embed, probably like the, architecture, like you can't embed whether it's an ARM Mac or an Intel Mac. But yeah, I think really, not trying to get it perfect, but like asking those kinds of questions, I think is pretty important. And certainly, the on-chain kind of exercise gets you there because you can't, link to a JavaScript file and that kind of thing. So at least on that, sort of the high level side of things philosophically. So yeah, I think that's a good point.
Let's get to Whale real quick, and then we can have our like closing thoughts.
Oh, should I stay on this topic? Because I definitely wanted to talk about something else. I'm fine to stay on the topic, though. I mean,
no, dude, say whatever you want to say. This is your time.
Wow. Okay, so I'm ultra bearish on this ETH proof of work experiment. They're massively underprepared. They put out the code change today, and they're supposed to turn on the chain or whatever today. Gas fees don't go to miners; they go to a murky wallet, 0x01c. It's tagged as miner DAO address, so they made up a DAO that receives all the gas fees indefinitely. Like I don't know this, and it's unverified on their blockchain explorer of choice. So, and so I mean, I kind of came to like mainly like let Middlemarch know and be like, yeah, I mean, you can look at if you go to the Ethereum implementation and then you go to the fork for proof of work, like the literal GitHub fork, you could see they did like 7 code changes at once, and and like I commented on it. I was like, "So gas fees are going to this wallet? Like what?" Yeah, I'm
So how do I
putting it.
dump my POW ETH? This sounds like a prime dumping opportunity.
Oh yeah, you could probably dump it. Yeah, there's some exchanges that'll take it.
How do we get on there? And there's an Etherscan and everything?
There's like a block explorer. I mean, as long as the chain like survives for a little longer, I mean, yeah, you could dump.
I heard you're vulnerable to replay attacks if you do that, though.
Yeah, so this is the other thing that they didn't prepare for. So they haven't been replay attacked yet, but like this definitely was a risk for a second. Um, they picked a chain ID that's already taken. So at first they weren't going to change chain ID. Then they were like, okay, well we'll pick a chain ID. It's going to be 10,001, and then it was pointed out by companies and by people on GitHub, just like, oh, by the way, this is taken. Like like if you do this, like MetaMask is going to get confused. Like, I mean, you can't use the same chain ID. It's going to be confusing for nodes. And that's what happened. They went ahead and It's funny because I went into a Twitter space to challenge them and say you need to do a different chain ID, and they said, okay, we'll do 13,001, and I was like, oh, okay. They picked a new one, good. And then I look at their Twitter and they said, we're going with 10,001, and then like all the comments are like, you have been warned multiple times that this chain ID is used. Now people are commenting that there are issues when connecting their MetaMask.
That's pretty sick. It makes me very bullish on Ethereum itself because it just goes to show how difficult it is to assemble a competent team who is both working in good faith for the betterment of the entire chain and all of its users, and to also have that same team be incredibly freaking elite at what they are doing and perform it, without a hitch, and basically get this off and successfully merge with very 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 few errors. And I think that's sick. And
Yeah, I couldn't agree
I love
more.
that for ETH.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, like, if you think about how much in advance, like, node operators knew that they needed to update their code. I mean, like, they knew for years. First of all, like years in advance, they knew the difficulties going up, the difficulty bomb, and that they need to move to proof of stake eventually. Um, and then they were given like months or weeks, like here's the code change. Please update your code. And then there was the Bellatrix upgrade that was basically like kicking off nodes that haven't been upgraded yet. And yeah, it was just massively prepared. While this experiment is like all happening in one day, and I find this fascinating, and I think it's going to
It is
flop.
fascinating. Yeah, it's like a sprint. It's like a game jam for blockchain. It's very interesting.
Yeah, no, I entered the space, and then people were just like, "We're being innovative and fast," and I'm like, "Oh God, this is not how I think software should be." Just
Yeah.
me, just
Well,
me, of course. I mean,
cool. No, I like that we got some merge discourse into this space today. I think we planned to talk about it a lot, but then there's just so many interesting conversations that ended up happening over the last 2.5 hours. Especially hearing from the dude who owned, the second X copy, like very
yeah, that
very
guy was
cool
cool. Yeah.
space. We should probably wrap it up. I need to go eat, and I'm sure everyone else here has lives to get to. But I'd like to close out by saying thank you all for coming and listening. And if you're in New York City, please reach out. This is the last Capsule 21 pod/space that I will be doing from my home state of Michigan. I will be moving, so that's very exciting. And
Wow!
I think that's all I got.
Huge news! You
It
just
is
dropped
huge
that
news.
huge news. That's a doorknob comment. As the doorknob, you open the doorknob. That's amazing. I live in New York State. Maybe we can. I mean, we had the beat latte. Yeah, thank you to everyone, and thank you to our listeners on Spotify. If you're listening to this now and you are on Spotify, I will give you $1,000, and I will very much appreciate it. You are sticking with it, but you are not alone, or at least you won't be for long. But the real thing I want to say to you, if you're on Spotify, come to the space. It's 5 p.m. Eastern time. whether it's daylight or standard time. Soon it'll be standard. Again, 5 p.m. Eastern time on Twitter. You can interact. You can say anything you want. We are yet to ban anyone or even really cut anyone off. So you can get that. Yeah, you can get that level. But I really appreciate y'all. And, Pib, what do you got?
No, you've said it all, I think. Here it's 1:30, so here it's time to go to bed.
Wow. I love it. Couldn't have said it better.
What a legend.
Myself.
What a
those
legend.
exact words. Episode 2 done. Thank you all. Peace. See you next Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern. React and goodbye.